Unaware she owned the company signing his $70 billion deal, he invited his ex-wife to his wedding to humiliate her. But she arrived with bodyguards and a billionaire, and what she did crushed him forever. The black Jeep Grand Cherokee pulled to a stop 15 feet ahead of where Victoria sat crumpled on the curb. And for a moment she considered running, because accepting help meant acknowledging how completely she'd fallen apart. But her legs wouldn't cooperate, even if her pride demanded it. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, maybe 6'2", wearing jeans and a simple gray Henley that somehow looked expensive in the way quality materials always do. But his face held none of the judgment she'd expected, only concern that seemed genuine rather than performative. "Miss, are you all right?" His voice carried a slight southern accent softened by years of living elsewhere, the kind of voice that made you trust someone before your brain had time to question whether you should. "My daughter noticed you from the road, and we couldn't just drive past someone clearly in distress." Victoria wiped at her face with the back of her hand. Honor is aware that her mascara had created raccoon circles around her eyes, and that she probably looked like exactly what she was, a woman whose life had just imploded. "I'm fine, but thank you for stopping," she lied, the words automatic even though everything about her appearance contradicted them. The rear door opened, and a little girl, maybe 8 years old, with dark curls pulled into 2 ponytails and eyes that held wisdom beyond her years, climbed out and walked directly to Victoria without hesitation. "You're not fine," the child said, with the brutal honesty only children can deliver without cruelty. "You're crying the same way I cried when my mama died, but Daddy says that sometimes strangers become angels when we need them most." The man, her father, winced slightly at his daughter's bluntness, but didn't contradict her. "I'm Nathan Richardson, and this is my daughter Emma," he said, crouching down to Victoria's eye level in a gesture that felt respectful rather than condescending. "You don't have to tell us what happened, but we can't leave you sitting on a street corner as the sun goes down. Let us at least drive you somewhere safe. A friend's house, a hotel, anywhere you need to go." Something in Victoria's chest cracked wider at the kindness. It's because she'd spent the last 4 hours convinced that human decency had died somewhere between her driveway and this curb. "I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, the words tasting like failure but feeling like truth. "My husband, ex-husband, his mother threw me out, and I don't have family in this city. Just colleagues who wouldn't understand, and friends who were really his friends who stopped calling when they chose sides." Nathan's expression darkened with anger. But it wasn't directed at her. It was the righteous fury of someone who'd witnessed injustice and found it intolerable. "Then you'll come with us," he said, standing and offering his hand. "I have a guest house at my property that's fully furnished, but sitting empty. And before you protest, you understand that I'm not offering charity. I'm offering basic human decency that should never be considered extraordinary." What Victoria didn't know, what she wouldn't discover until weeks later, was that Nathan Richardson owned Richardson Global Holdings, a private equity firm worth $8 billion that had made its fortune turning around failing companies and investing in emerging technologies. He'd lost his wife, Emma's mother, to cancer 3 years earlier, and the tragedy had transformed him from a ruthless businessman into someone who understood that money meant nothing if you couldn't use it to help people carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. Emma grabbed Victoria's hand with the unself-conscious trust of a child who'd been taught to see people's hearts rather than their circumstances. "You can stay in the room next to mine," she announced, already planning their future. "It has a big bathtub and a view of the garden where the hummingbirds come every morning. And Daddy makes really good pancakes, even though he burns the bacon sometimes." The guest house turned out to be a 3-bedroom cottage on a property that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Rolling lawns, strategic landscaping, a main house that balanced modern design with classic elegance. Nathan had carried her broken suitcase without comment, who had shown her to a space that was nicer than the bedroom she'd shared with Derek, had left her alone to process everything while Emma delivered a stack of fresh towels and a promise that tomorrow will be better because that's what Daddy always says, and he's never wrong. That first night, Victoria had stood under a shower hot enough to turn her skin pink, washing away the day's humiliation, but unable to wash away the questions that haunted her. She'd built a $1 billion company from her father's legacy, had quadrupled its value through strategic acquisitions and technological innovations, but she'd failed at the one thing that should have been simplest, recognizing that the man she'd married had never truly seen her. The water mixed with her tears as she wondered whether she'd spent 7 years loving a fantasy while ignoring reality, whether her success in business had somehow blinded her to her failure in reading character. What she couldn't have known, standing in that shower while her old life burned to ashes, was that the man who'd offered her shelter would become the man who'd teach her what real partnership looked like. She couldn't have known that Emma's motherless heart and her own broken one would heal each other through late-night conversations and early morning garden walks. She couldn't have known that in 6 months, she'd be standing in front of a mirror preparing to attend her ex-husband's wedding. But instead of feeling destroyed, she'd feel powerful in ways that had nothing to do with the company she owned and everything to do with the woman she'd become. But on that first night, all she knew was that strangers had shown her more kindness in 1 hour than her husband's family had shown her in 7 years, and that sometimes rock bottom is actually the foundation upon which you build something better. 5 months had passed since that night in the guest house, but the transformation felt like a lifetime compressed into weeks of discovery, healing, and unexpected love that had grown from friendship into something neither Victoria nor Nathan had planned, but both had desperately needed. Victoria had moved from the guest house into the main residence 3 months ago, not as a guest, but as Nathan's wife. After a proposal that had come during one of their early morning garden walks when Emma had presented a ring she'd helped choose and asked, "Will you be my mama for real now? Not just in my heart?" The wedding had been simple, a judge's chamber ceremony with Emma as the flower girl and Nathan's business partner as the witness. But it had felt more genuine than the elaborate affair she'd shared with Derek, one where 300 guests had celebrated a union that was already cracking beneath the surface of expensive floral arrangements and a 7-tier cake. Nathan had never asked about her past beyond what she'd volunteered, had never pressured her to explain the occasional nightmares that woke her at 3 in the morning, had simply held her and reminded her that the past had no power unless she gave it permission to control her present. What had shifted everything was the morning Victoria finally told him the truth about Hayes Technologies, the company she'd inherited and grown from a modest software firm into a global powerhouse worth $4.7 billion. They'd been sitting at the breakfast table while Emma practiced piano in the next room, and Victoria had slid a folder across the granite countertop containing documents that proved she wasn't just a substitute teacher escaping a bad marriage. She was the silent majority shareholder and CEO of a corporation that had been courting partnerships with some of the largest firms in the industry. Nathan had studied the documents with the careful attention of someone who understood corporate structures and financial statements, but his response had surprised her. "Ina, you've been carrying this secret like it's something to be ashamed of," he'd said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But all I see is a woman brilliant enough to build an empire and humble enough to want to be loved for who she is rather than what she owns. And if your ex-husband was too blind to recognize that combination, then his loss became my greatest blessing." That conversation had happened 2 weeks ago. But yesterday morning had brought something that transformed Victoria's healing into a test of her character. A cream-colored envelope with her name written in calligraphy, forwarded from her old address to the post office box she maintained for legal correspondence. The return address had made her hands shake. Derek and Amber Thompson, and inside had been an invitation to their wedding, scheduled for the following Saturday at the Grandview Estate, in the same venue where Derek had once promised he'd never remarry if something happened to their relationship because the memories would be too painful. The cruelty of the invitation was evident in every detail. Her name listed as Victoria Hayes within guest in smaller print, as if Derek didn't know she'd remarried. The notation at the bottom requesting formal attire, as if she might show up in anything less than her best. But what had made Victoria actually laugh, a sound somewhere between disbelief and vindication, was the small card that had fallen from the envelope, an announcement that Derek Thompson, Senior Vice President of Thompson Industries, would be celebrating not just his nuptials but also the finalization of the largest deal in company history, a $70 billion partnership that will revolutionize our industry. Nathan had been reading over her shoulder, and she'd felt him tense as he recognized the implications. Thompson Industries has been negotiating with Hayes Technologies for 8 months, he'd said quietly. I've seen the news coverage, but I didn't connect that Derek Thompson worked there, because Thompson is common enough, and you never mentioned his employer. Victoria had pulled up the contract files on her laptop, documents her executive team had been sending her for review and approval, and there it was. Thompson Industries' proposal for a technological integration partnership that would give them access to Hayes Technologies' proprietary systems in exchange for a revenue-sharing agreement and joint venture opportunities. Derek's signature appeared throughout the preliminary documentation as the project lead, the man who'd spent nearly a year courting her company without realizing he was courting his ex-wife's approval. The board had been waiting for her final authorization to proceed, but she'd been stalling, telling herself it was because she wanted to review every detail, when the truth was that some instinct had made her hesitate every time she saw the Thompson Industries letterhead. Now she understood why. Fate had been waiting for this moment, for the convergence of past and present, for the opportunity to teach Derek Thompson a lesson about consequences that no business school could provide. He invited you to humiliate you, Nathan had said, his voice carrying controlled anger. He wants you to see him succeed with another woman, to prove that discarding you was the right choice. But he has no idea that you hold his professional future in your hands. Emma had wandered into the kitchen then, sensing the tension, and had climbed into Victoria's lap with the intuitive understanding of a child who'd learned to read emotions before she'd learned to read chapter books. The mean man who hurt you is getting married, she'd said, not a question but a statement. Are you going to his wedding, Mama V? Victoria had looked at her stepdaughter, this child who'd lost her biological mother but had chosen to love again anyway, who'd taught Victoria that family wasn't about blood, but about showing up for each other on the hard days, and had made her decision. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to the wedding, she'd said, but I won't be going alone. Like when I won't be going as the woman he remembers. Nathan's eyes had met hers across Emma's head, and she'd seen understanding there, support without question. I'll arrange security, he'd said. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Bodyguards, the Bentley, everything that makes a statement. But more importantly, we're going to show him that throwing you away was the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. The contract document sat on her desk now, unsigned, waiting for her decision. She could approve the deal and let Derek have his $70 billion triumph, could prove she was bigger than his cruelty by separating business from personal grievances. Or she could destroy everything he'd worked for with a single email declining the partnership, could give him a taste of the devastation he'd served her 6 months ago on that driveway. The choice should have been simple. Take the high road, be the better person. He proved that success was the best revenge. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Patricia Thompson's face twisted with contempt, heard Derek's silence as his mother assaulted her, felt the concrete scraping her knees as her belongings scattered across the driveway like garbage. The wedding was in 3 days, but the real question wasn't what she'd wear or who she'd bring. It was who she'd become when she walked through those doors, and whether the woman Derek had thrown away would save him or destroy him when she finally revealed the truth. The Grandview Estates parking lot filled with luxury vehicles as guests arrived for what society pages had called the wedding of the season, but none of the Mercedes sedans or Tesla Model S's turned heads quite like the midnight black Bentley Flying Spur that glided past the valet station with 2 suburban SUVs flanking it like a presidential motorcade. Victoria watched through tinted windows as wedding guests paused mid-conversation to stare, their curiosity evident in the way they craned their necks to see who commanded that level of security. But she felt remarkably calm, considering she was about to walk into the lion's den, wearing Valentino and carrying the power to destroy the lion. Nathan squeezed her hand, his presence grounding her in the present rather than the past. You don't have to do this, he reminded her for the 3rd time that morning. We can turn around right now. And you can make your decision about the contract from the comfort of our home, surrounded by people who actually love you. But Victoria shook her head because some lessons couldn't be taught from a distance. They required proximity, eye contact, the visceral understanding that came from watching someone's face as their world shifted beneath their feet. He invited me here to humiliate me, she said, echoing Nathan's words from 3 days ago. But he's about to learn that humiliation is a boomerang that eventually returns to the person who threw it. The lead bodyguard, a former Secret Service agent named Marcus, who Nathan employed for high-profile events, opened the door and offered his hand. Victoria stepped out into afternoon sunshine that felt like a spotlight, immediately aware of the whispers that rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat fields. She'd chosen her outfit with surgical precision, a champagne-colored silk dress that probably cost more than the wedding cake, paired with the 8-carat diamond necklace Nathan had given her as a wedding gift, her hair styled in an elegant updo that screamed professional polish rather than desperate ex-wife. Nathan emerged from the other side of the vehicle, commanding attention in a custom Tom Ford suit that fit him like it had been painted on. And when he took Victoria's arm, the message was unmistakable. She hadn't arrived broken and alone. She'd arrived as half of a power couple that made Derek and Amber look like children playing dress-up. Emma had stayed home with her nanny despite wanting to come, because Victoria had insisted this particular battle wasn't appropriate for 8-year-old eyes. But the child's parting words echoed in her mind. "Show him what happens when you throw away treasure, Mama V." The ceremony was being held in the estate's garden pavilion, white chairs arranged in perfect rows beneath a floral arch that must have cost $20,000. But Victoria and Nathan took seats in the back row, despite the usher's attempt to move them closer. "We're fine here," Nathan had said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We prefer to observe from a distance." When Derek appeared at the altar, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but smaller somehow than Victoria remembered, as if leaving him had revealed that his presence in her life had been inflated by her willingness to make herself smaller. He was scanning the crowd with the satisfied expression of a man surveying his kingdom. His eyes passed over the back row once, then snapped back as his brain registered what his eyes had seen, and Victoria watched the color drain from his face as he recognized her. But it wasn't just recognition. It was the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd miscalculated catastrophically, because the woman he'd expected to see crying in a cheap dress was instead sitting beside a man whose net worth exceeded Derek's entire company's annual revenue, surrounded by security that suggested she wasn't just doing well, but operating on a level Derek had never imagined possible. His hand gripped the altar to steady himself, and Victoria saw Amber notice his distraction, saw her follow his gaze and stiffen when she spotted the ex-wife who was supposed to be broken and instead looked like royalty. The ceremony proceeded with all the warmth of a business merger, which Victoria supposed was appropriate given that Derek's relationship with Amber had always been more about ego gratification than genuine connection. The officiant droned through traditional vows that meant nothing when the couple speaking them had built their relationship on betrayal. And Victoria found herself studying Derek with the detached interest of an anthropologist observing a specimen. Had she really loved this man, or had she loved the idea of marriage to someone who'd seemed stable and predictable before she discovered that his predictability included predictably choosing himself over everyone else? The reception moved indoors to the estate's ballroom, where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across tables draped in ivory silk and centerpieces that could have fed a small village for what they'd cost. Victoria and Nathan had been seated at table 12, far from the head table but close enough to observe, another calculated slight that assumed she'd feel diminished by the distance. Instead, she felt strategic, positioned perfectly to watch Derek's performance while remaining outside his immediate circle of sycophants and enablers. Patricia Thompson had spotted her within minutes of the reception starting, and the older woman's approach carried all the subtlety of an incoming missile. "What are you doing here?" Patricia hissed, her face flushed with champagne and indignation. "You weren't actually supposed to come. The invitation was Derek's way of showing you he'd moved on, not an actual request for your presence." Nathan stood, his 6'2" frame creating a physical barrier between Patricia and Victoria. "Mrs. Thompson," he said with excessive politeness that somehow sounded more cutting than rudeness, "my wife received an invitation, and we decided to honor it. But if our presence offends you, perhaps you should examine why your son invited someone he supposedly doesn't want here." Patricia's eyes widened at the word wife, and Victoria watched understanding filter through her expression. The expensive dress, the security, the man who carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Well, you remarried," Patricia said, the words landing somewhere between accusation and disbelief. "Some other poor fool bought your act, but give it time. He'll realize what Derek realized and trade up just like my son did." The moment hung suspended, charged with potential violence, but Victoria simply smiled. "Actually, Patricia, my husband didn't trade up. He recognized value where your son saw worthlessness. But then again, Nathan actually built his fortune through intelligence and hard work, rather than inheriting a position in Daddy's company and pretending competence equals character." Before Patricia could respond, Derek appeared, Amber clinging to his arm like a barnacle attached to a sinking ship. Up close, her ex-husband looked different, older, more stressed. The confidence he'd worn during their marriage replaced by something that looked suspiciously like desperation. "Victoria," he said, forcing joviality into his tone, "I'm glad you could make it, and I see you brought a date." "My husband," Victoria corrected, rising to stand beside Nathan. "Nathan Richardson. Meet Derek Thompson, the man who taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise." Derek's handshake with Nathan was perfunctory, competitive, the grip lasting 2 seconds too long, in that way insecure men have of trying to establish dominance through physical pressure. "I Richardson," Derek repeated, his mind clearly working to place the name. "Any relation to Richardson Global Holdings?" "I am Richardson Global Holdings," Nathan said simply, "founder, CEO, and majority shareholder. But more importantly, I'm the man lucky enough to have married your ex-wife, which means your loss truly was my gain." The color drained from Derek's face again. Ian and Victoria could see calculations happening behind his eyes. Richardson Global was a legendary name in private equity circles, the kind of firm that could buy and sell Thompson Industries before lunch and still have capital left over. "You married a billionaire," Derek said to Victoria, the words emerging strangled. "How did you even meet someone like—" "He stopped to help me the day your mother threw me onto the street," Victoria interrupted, Sword deciding that honesty was the sharpest weapon available. "I was sitting on a curb crying, completely broken, and Nathan and his daughter saw someone in pain and decided that basic human decency mattered more than convenience, which is apparently a character trait your family couldn't recognize if it was wearing a name tag." Amber had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she tugged at Derek's sleeve. "Derek, we should greet the other guests," she said, in her voice carrying the artificial sweetness of someone trying to defuse a bomb. "This is our wedding day, and we shouldn't let complications distract from our celebration." But Derek wasn't listening to his new bride. He was staring at Victoria with an expression that mixed regret, confusion, and growing horror. "You always said you were just a substitute teacher," he said, his voice quiet enough that only their small circle could hear. "You lived modestly, never spent money on luxury items, drove a Honda Civic for God's sake, but now you're married to someone worth billions, and you're wearing diamonds that probably cost more than our house." Victoria felt Nathan's hand settle on her lower back, a gesture of support that reminded her she wasn't fighting this battle alone. "I was a substitute teacher, Derek," she said. "But I was also a lot of other things you never bothered to ask about because you were too busy categorizing me as modest and simple, and deciding those qualities made me less than rather than recognizing they made me someone who didn't need expensive things to know her worth." The conversation was interrupted by the bandleader announcing the first dance, and Derek and Amber were pulled away by the wedding coordinator, who didn't care about personal drama when there was a schedule to maintain. Victoria watched them take the dance floor, watched Derek move through the motions while his eyes kept drifting back to table 12, watched Amber's smile grow more strained as she realized her groom was mentally somewhere else entirely. "You're enjoying this," Nathan observed, not quite a question. "I'm observing karma work in real time," Victoria corrected. "But the real moment hasn't arrived yet. That comes when I decide whether to sign the contract that gives him everything he's been working toward, or whether I pull the plug and watch his career ambitions die alongside his marriage to his mistress." The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Dinner courses that tasted like expensive cardboard, toasts that praised Derek's business acumen, and Amber's beauty without once mentioning love or partnership. The cake cutting that felt more like a photo opportunity than a genuine moment of joy. Victoria made small talk with table mates who recognized Nathan and spent the meal trying to pitch business ideas or secure introductions, but her attention never fully left Derek, who seemed to wilt with each passing hour, as if the weight of his choices was finally settling on shoulders that had never learned to carry consequence. The moment Victoria had been waiting for arrived at 9:15. When Derek approached table 12 alone, Amber occupied with her bridesmaids on the opposite side of the ballroom. "Can we talk?" he asked, the question directed at Victoria, but his eyes acknowledging Nathan's presence. "Privately, just for 5 minutes?" Nathan raised an eyebrow, leaving the decision to Victoria, and she nodded. "The terrace," she said. "But Nathan comes with me, because I don't trust you enough to be alone with you. And honestly, Derek, what, you lost the right to private conversations when you chose to let your mother assault me while you watched." The terrace overlooked the estate's grounds, manicured gardens stretching into darkness, punctuated by strategic lighting that created pools of illumination in the night. Derek's hands shook as he gripped the stone railing, and when he spoke, his voice carried none of the arrogance Victoria remembered. "I made a mistake," he said simply. "Leaving you, choosing Amber, always believing my mother when she said you weren't good enough. All of it was a mistake, but I didn't realize it until I saw you tonight and understood what I'd actually thrown away." Victoria laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "You didn't realize anything, Derek," she said. "You realize that I'm married to someone wealthier than you, that I look happy in a way I never looked with you. Here, and your ego can't handle the cognitive dissonance of the woman you discarded thriving without you." "That's not," Derek started, but Victoria held up her hand. "Let me finish," she said, her voice steady. "You want to know the real irony? I could have told you years ago that I wasn't just a substitute teacher, that I had resources and connections and a company that would have partnered with Thompson Industries in ways that could have elevated both our futures. But I kept it secret because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I could provide. And you know what I learned? You didn't love me at all. You loved the idea of a modest wife who made you feel superior, who didn't challenge your mediocrity, who accepted your mother's abuse because I believed marriage meant sacrifice." Derek's face crumbled, tears actually forming in his eyes. "I know I hurt you," he whispered. "I know my mother was cruel, and I should have stopped her. But I was weak and stupid, and I thought Amber represented something better when really she's just younger and more impressed by things that don't matter." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Victoria asked. "Knowing you destroyed our marriage for someone you're now admitting isn't actually better, just shinier?" "I'm asking for forgiveness," Derek said, the words desperate. "Not to get back together. I know that ship has sailed, but because I need you to know that I see my mistakes and I'd take them all back if I could." Nathan had been silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke. "Forgiveness isn't something you demand from people you've destroyed," he said quietly. "It's something they grant when and if they're ready. But it's never owed to you simply because you finally developed enough self-awareness to feel guilty." Victoria pulled her phone from her clutch purse, opened her email application, and showed Derek the screen. "Do you recognize this?" she asked, watching his eyes widen as he read the subject line. "Thompson Industries Partnership Proposal. Final authorization required." "That's our deal," Derek breathed. "When the $70 billion partnership with Hayes Technologies that we've been negotiating for 8 months. The deal that's supposed to be announced tonight alongside the wedding. The deal that's going to make my career and establish Thompson Industries as a major player in technological integration." "Hayes Technologies," Victoria repeated. "Victoria Hayes Technologies, to be precise, though I've always operated under my maiden name to separate my business identity from my personal life. Which is how you spent 8 months courting my company without realizing you were actually begging your ex-wife for approval." The color that had drained from Derek's face earlier now disappeared entirely, leaving him ghost white in the terrace lighting. "You own Hayes Technologies," he whispered. Not quite a question because the truth was written across Victoria's face. "The company worth almost $5 billion, the one that's been stringing us along for months, will making us jump through hoops and revise proposals and prove our worth. That's yours?" "Every share," Victoria confirmed. I inherited the foundation from my father and built it into what it is today. But I never told you because I wanted a husband who valued me, not my assets. And congratulations, Derek. You proved exactly what kind of man you were by throwing me away when you thought I had nothing to offer. Derek's legs seemed to give out, and he sagged against the railing. The deal, he said weakly. Are you going to... the contract is supposed to be finalized by Monday, and the board is expecting my announcement tonight, and if Hayes Technologies pulls out now, Thompson Industries will look incompetent, and I'll be... Destroyed? Victoria finished for him. Professionally humiliated? Reduced to nothing because someone with more power decided you weren't worth the effort? Tell me, Derek, does any of that sound familiar? Because it should. It's exactly what you did to me 6 months ago, when you decided my value as a human being was less important than your desire to sleep with your secretary. Please, Derek begged, and the word tasted like victory, even though Victoria felt no joy in hearing it. I know I don't deserve your help, but this deal isn't just about me. It's about 3,000 employees at Thompson Industries who've worked on this project, about innovation that could actually help people. When about you finally understanding consequences, Victoria interrupted. But here's what you never learned, Derek. I'm not you. I don't destroy lives because I'm angry or hurt or seeking revenge. I'm better than that. Better than you ever gave me credit for. Better than your mother believed possible. She pulled up the contract on her phone, her thumb hovering over the signature authorization. I'm going to approve this deal, she said, watching hope flood Derek's face. But not because you deserve it, and not because I forgive what you did. I'm approving it because 3,000 innocent people shouldn't suffer because their vice president is a morally bankrupt coward who let his mother abuse his wife. Derek's relief was palpable, tears now streaming down his face. Thank you, he gasped. Victoria, I swear I'll never forget this. I'll tell everyone how generous you were. How? You'll tell no one. Victoria cut him off, her voice steel. The deal will proceed with one modification. You're removed as project lead effective immediately, replaced by someone competent who won't spend board meetings wondering if his ex-wife is going to pull the plug. You'll remain at Thompson Industries in your current position, but this project that was supposed to make your career will now proceed without you. And you'll watch from the sidelines as other people receive credit for work you initiated, but don't deserve to complete. She signed the authorization with a digital flourish, then showed him the confirmation. It's done, she said. The deal proceeds, the employees keep their jobs, Thompson Industries gets its partnership, but you, Derek, get a front row seat to watching your greatest professional achievement happen without you. And every day for the rest of your career, you'll remember that the woman you threw away like garbage had the power to destroy you, but chose mercy instead because she's everything you're not. Compassionate, strategic, and capable of separating business from personal vendettas. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but Victoria wasn't finished. One more thing, she said. That house where your mother assaulted me? I bought it 3 weeks ago through a shell corporation, and I'm donating it to a women's shelter for domestic violence survivors, which means Amber will need to find somewhere else to live when she realizes that marrying you was the worst decision of her life. But at least the house will serve a better purpose than it ever did when we lived there. With that, Victoria turned and walked back into the reception, Nathan's hand warm against her back. Leaving Derek collapsed against the terrace railing with the weight of his choices finally crushing him the way he'd once crushed her. The band was playing something upbeat, guests were dancing, and Amber was scanning the crowd looking for her new husband. But Victoria felt lighter than she had in months, because she'd finally learned the difference between revenge and justice, between destruction and boundaries, between being cruel and being strong. As they moved through the ballroom toward the exit, Victoria caught Patricia Thompson's eye across the room, and she smiled, not with malice, but with the serene confidence of someone who'd survived the worst these people could deliver, and had emerged not just intact, but victorious. Patricia's expression crumbled as understanding dawned, as she realized that the woman she'd thrown onto the street now controlled her son's professional future. But Victoria didn't stop to gloat. She simply kept walking, kept moving forward, kept choosing to be better than the people who tried to break her. In the car on the way home, Nathan asked the question that mattered. "Do you feel better?" Victoria considered, watching the city lights blur past the window. "I feel free," she said finally. "Not because I destroyed him, I didn't, but because I proved to myself that having power over someone who hurt me doesn't mean I have to use it the way they would have. I chose mercy, but mercy on my terms, with consequences that teach rather than just punish. And that choice makes me someone I can respect when I look in the mirror." They drove home to where Emma was waiting, undoubtedly still awake despite her bedtime, because she'd want to hear every detail. And Victoria realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying Derek or humiliating Patricia or proving her worth to people who'd never valued her. The best revenge was building a life so full of genuine love, to authentic success and real purpose, that her ex-husband's opinion became irrelevant. A footnote in a story that was never really about him, but about her discovering that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're actually made of. And what Victoria was made of, it turned out, was something far stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. Dear viewers, thank you for joining us on Victoria's journey from devastation to redemption. What lessons did this story teach you? Would you have signed the deal and shown mercy like Victoria? Or would you have destroyed Derek's career as payback for what he did? What does this story reveal about the difference between revenge and justice? Between power and wisdom? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear what you would have done differently if you were in Victoria's position. And if this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about how we treat people when we have power over them, please subscribe to our channel for more emotionally powerful stories that combine entertainment with life lessons you can carry into your own journey. Remember, your value isn't determined by those who reject you, but by how you rise after being broken. See you in the next story.